Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Superman number 25. So, looking over the solicitations, I saw that this looked like a very easy jumping on point. It's been a very long time since we talked about this particular Superman series, written by Brian Michael Bendis and with Ivan Reis doing the artwork. But the last time we talked about it was in the context of it being one of the worst comics out there, out of what came out in 2019. I maintain that viewpoint. The Superman run did have some interesting ideas here and there, but it felt hollow and truly lacking compared to the Superman writing we got under Tomasi, as Bucket Think Tank actually wrote in chat before we started the stream, or Dan Jurgens, who was doing Action Comics, in my opinion. This book kind of surprised me a little bit in that I enjoyed aspects of it, but overall, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. We'll get into exactly why that is, and the reason is a huge problem that really has to do. Well, let's just put it this way. The best part of this book is actually, in my opinion, the stuff dealing with Synmar. He's kind of interesting, and Bendis does a pretty good job writing about this alien race and how this new threat came to be. The worst part of this book, and it's so telling, is Superman, who feels hollow without his family, and without that kind of warmth that would make for a fun ongoing series about with this character. So the worst problem in the Superman book is Superman, and I can't possibly recommend that. But this book, Superman number 25 that is, does have value, and it's not the worst Superman book I've read written by Bendis. It's not even that terrible overall. Ivan Reis is a competent artist, and he does some cool stuff here with Synmar and his origins. But it's not nearly enough when your main character is the weakest part of the book. I just find that so funny that, like, the best part of the story isn't Superman. In fact, he's a huge weakness of everything. It's happened before in stories. It's just amusing. Anyhow, this book is written by Brian Michael Bendis, as I mentioned. Ivan Reis does pencils. Julio Ferreira does, and Danny Mickey does inking. Alex Sinclair does coloring, and Dave Sharp does the lettering. And they do a good job as an art team, because we get a lot of alien planet stuff. We flash back throughout. I was going to say Superman history, but more Lana Lang history. And there's some cool moments of artwork because of that. Little bits of Lois Lane, even. All of that's pretty good, but the core part of this book is the weakness. And let's get into that a little bit. So we open on an alien planet, I guess called Synmar? I'm not entirely sure. But these aliens are observing the destruction of planet Krypton. And we get introduced to basically this cabinet that rules over this alien world. There's like the president, a judge, a secretary of states, a chief of sciences of all these different titles and little personalities talking. I actually really like this part because it runs against the grain of, I guess what we'll say, typical Bendis writing, which is full of like every character kind of becoming a sort of Joss Whedon-y joke delivery machine. These characters are all interesting. Some of them are more peaceful and rational, others are more panicky and reactive to the destruction of this planet. The president's pretty quiet and lets her advisors kind of talk in reaction to this, sort of taking it all in. Like I said, like this alien stuff, and a huge part of it is not actually this Synmar character, but like Dreddy, the president, and all these other characters who are talking about this planet being destroyed, and even see the Superman, like Kal-El's pod, leaving the planet. And some of them react with alarm. Others very rationally say, like, there's a baby in a spaceship hurtling from a doomed planet. It might need our help. Then they talk about it heading to Earth, and they ultimately decide to kind of leave it. Kind of reasoning correctly, it's like, well, it's just a baby. We can't judge it. but we should be ready in case it becomes a threat one day. And they just start keeping an eye on Superman as he grows up. Well, so Kal-El, becoming Clark Kent, and we cut to Smallville and him talking to Lana Lang. He asks her out to a dance, but she's seeing somebody. It's a cute little moment, and it's nice to flash back to that, and it really plays up the advantages of having Ivan Reis's artwork. Everything's pretty great so far. Then we cut to, I guess, Synmar, the character, who's fighting in a war. It's a little hard to follow, but I actually kind of think that's a bit of an advantage to this, in the sense of we're just kind of thrown into this alien world and this culture, and we don't have a ton of exposition. These aliens aren't unnaturally explaining elements of their culture that they would know well to us, the audience, and you kind of have to piece together, like, okay, this Synmar character is some sort of honored and venerated warrior that they're trying to elevate to have these powers on the level of Superman, and it's something they feel they need as, like, in response to threats. They're in conflict with the Thanagarians. Tempe Smolka, thanks for joining us. Oh, and Clyde Frosh and Akbar left nice little messages from before, kind of iterating some stuff I'm sure I'm going to be saying about Bendis and Superman later on anyways. Karsten Logan, thanks for joining us as well. York Lane. So basically, Rogal Zar again. Yeah, we'll talk about that, but Rogal Zar is an earlier villain from the Superman series, and part of the weakness of that series, in my opinion. He was a pretty boring villain, although I think at least this stuff about the alien culture so far is more interesting than Rogal Zar ever was. I will give it that. We then go to the Daily Star, and Lana Lang is starting out as an anchor or something. She sees Superman, and he sees her, I guess, given his superior vision. And then we cut to, I think, my favorite part of the book, where the aliens are, like, baffled watching Earth and trying to understand what's going on with Superman and the dynamics of Earth. And they're like, oh, what's crime? Like, they don't understand that. And they're like, oh, okay, the planet's, like, really got this concept of corporate greed that is foreign to these aliens. They kind of joke about, like, well, there's, like, little funny lines, but they're not, like, jokey. They just are funny because these aliens don't understand things about them. Like, they're like, this Superman protects these little aliens, and they call, like, oh yeah, they have a funny line about how humans go to the bathroom in their own homes, which the aliens find disgusting. I thought that was really funny. So it's not, like, jokey. It's just these aliens are well written, in my opinion. They're written in a very alien kind of way, but they're not all just villains or one-sided either. Again, like, we have some of the more analytical characters explaining them to others, and others are reacting with, like, oh, that's gross, like, what do they do? And I thought that was funny. And they have a similar reaction to Superman, and they're like, okay, so he's a guardian, but he doesn't command their reverence or worship, and he kind of sits, like, on the sidelines of their politics, which the aliens kind of are relieved to see. They realize he's a humanist and that he isn't, like, this threat and stuff, and they recognize that. It's kind of interesting. They're not just immediately violent against Superman. And they kind of think, oh, well, then all this prep we were doing really wasn't for anything. But they are kind of, like, one of them's like, well, I assume he'll eventually get bored and leave. So they just agree to keep watch, like they do with Oa and Thanagar, as they say. Again, I find them pretty interesting. They seem quite powerful, but they mostly have sit on the sidelines up until now. And, like, they even question one of the aliens who wants to deal with Superman as a threat. And they say, like, you want to antagonize, like, this incredibly powerful Kryptonian? I find them pretty interesting. But then we get into, and so far I've been pretty complimenting of this book, and we're pretty far into it, but then we get to Lana Lang having a meeting with Clark and kind of talking about their dynamics, and things are different now that he's got a public identity. But she openly talks about how empty his apartment is and how like John's away at boarding school, as Clark puts it. Lois is off meeting with some crime family right now. I don't even know what she's up to at the moment. And Superman, as I've said before, feels alone and truly just like, I guess he is an alien, but just disconnected from the world around him. It really, like, see, it seems very frustrating, and I've talked about this problem before. And compounding that, his dialogue's pretty, like, silly. Like, Lana's kind of flirty and, like, not overly so. It's just like, oh, you're so sweet, Clark. And it's very empty. Then we get this really cool series of pages that you really can only appreciate if you get the print version, where everything's like straight up flipped, but they're just showing the rise of Synmar and this particular character, and it's also the name of their people, so it's a little weird, but basically this guy, Eisno, I guess, is the elevated soldier, but they also call him Synmar Utopica as his like code name, but I assume we'll just refer to him as Synmar, like I have been as the villain, because that's kind of how he's kind of introduced on the cover, or maybe that's the race. I don't know. But anyways, he kind of questions why he was created and elevated with these powers, and they just sort of brush it off as being like, well, it's not really necessary anymore. We then flash back to Lana Lang as Superwoman and how that's kind of not really a thing anymore. But again, it kind of feels empty. We have a less exciting, less fun world of superheroes and allies of Superman that had been established in the Jurgens era. Instead, it's just an empty, quiet world. And again, issues after it's been done already. Bendis does that little bit where Superman rushes off to go save someone, and the other character has to linger behind until he's like able to come back. It's an old bit, like from Bendis at this point, and he is repetitive, and people were comparing it to Rogol Zar in chat, and it is that same thing. Then there's they get paged about some sort of attack, and it appears Superman has attacked some sort of world, and finally Eisno, this new Superman equivalent among these Synmar aliens, is made aware of Superman and why he was created, and I guess he's supposed to be a threat. So there is some really interesting stuff going on with those aliens and how they were observing Superman like all along, I guess. But it really has weird connective tissue. It doesn't truly feel like they did such a good job setting up these aliens as multi-dimensional beings that it doesn't really feel natural. They're going to just push this conflict together for some reason. I guess it's some fakery or something that Superman's being framed, and again, that feels familiar to what, like, Bendis does this. He tends to get repetitive in his storytelling when we get into runs, and that's happening all over again. And then we have all the ongoing problems of Superman being like this isolated character. And yeah. But yeah, so it's this ongoing frustrating sort of thing. But there is really cool artwork, and I do appreciate like just this couple of flipped pages that do look really cool, and it is a pretty clever use of a book and the aspects of comic book storytelling. I don't really think it's enough on its own to justify any of this. While there are interesting elements, like Tevi was saying, in my opinion, it just seems so boring. Where it gets boring is if you've read a lot of these other Bendis written Superman books, a lot of this is repetitive. York Lane earlier brought up Rogol Zar, and it is gonna like very similar in that regard, where this alien is put on this destructive path against Superman. They even kind of look similar as sort of generic alien threats, and it's pretty disappointing from Bendis once again. I picked up this book to kind of see if things had changed, and to a degree things had, in that I found these aliens relatively well written from what I might normally expect out of Bendis, but everything else in this book is really wrong. And hopefully I tried to convey that and noted along the way, specifically just that this world of Superman feels more like a huge step backwards compared to what we were getting out of the early Rebirth days, where Superman had a family now, and he had new allies, a whole team of people he could call upon, including Lex Luthor, Superwoman, who's a key part of this story here, Kenan Kong, the new Superman, and a couple of others. Now it's pretty much just him, and to this day, I don't understand why Bendis chose to isolate Superman so much, but not once has it felt like it paid off. So no, I definitely don't recommend this book. It was really disappointing, and I ended up titling this video along those lines because we're introducing this new threat to Superman, and it really doesn't feel like much. The character is interesting, but as an enemy of Superman, I feel like it's just some alien equivalent of Superman, which is pretty dang boring. Why we're focusing on another big alien threat again just doesn't make sense to me. And all this stuff with these aliens and they're empowered by some sort of light, it just doesn't strike me as all that interesting. They just seem like another intergalactic power out there that I don't particularly care about. So, yeah, I think we'll leave it at there, but thanks for watching, everybody. We still have a couple of reviews left from last week, unfortunately, just because I was a little behind on that, but I'm making my way through them pretty quickly. And from there, we'll get into the next issue. Yeah, and Tevia, thanks for commenting and chatting, but you're pretty much just echoing what I've already said. So, thanks for checking in and every stuff. Thunder God Sid was saying, I think Bendis was struggling with creating a credible threat against Superman and missed the point of Superman. He's at his best when he's doing street level crime and inspiring hope in everyone. You know, the thing is, I don't fault Bendis for wanting to create new villains for Superman. I think that's a great idea. There's always room to bolster any superheroes, villains gallery, like rogues gallery and stuff. But these aliens so far, Rogolzar and Synmar, are very generic and don't feel like they're super memorable additions to the world of Superman enemies out there. And I feel as though, in spite of everything I just said, like, yeah, there's a good need to have new villains and threats. I feel like there are other runs out there, like the Hickman era X-Men, that are doing a good job at adding pretty memorable villains to the X-Men franchise, or I guess even Snyder stuff with Batman. What else have we reviewed recently where they're doing a good job of that? I think I put some books away. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but there are good examples of that. What's it called? Batman and the Joker War. We're getting like Punchline, who I think is a pretty cool addition, and Clown Hunter. But Bendis hasn't done a really good job, and even then, those arcs that I just mentioned, most of them do a good job of balancing themselves a little bit, using old threats and new threats combined and like across different story arcs to sort of create a more dynamic sense of storytelling. It would probably be more fun if we got to see Bendis take on more classic Superman villains. He doesn't have to get super repetitive with that, but doing something more often, or playing up one of those threats, reimagining them, or giving them something interesting or different to do, seems like a more stronger direction for him. But, well, there we go. If saying Bendis shouldn't have gotten rid of the Superman family for his boring ass stories that aren't fun to read. Well, yeah. And then Thunder God Sid was saying, I really love the family dynamic, especially Super Sons. Yeah, dismantling all of that for this really is disappointing. Kenneth Robinson says, how does a writer like Bendis miss the mark on Superman like this? Also, good morning, Comic Island. Always pleasure to be a part of these live streams. Thanks for joining us. I guess it's morning for wherever you live. We just started the afternoon here. Um, but it doesn't surprise me too much that Bendis does this, considering his track record has been all over the place. But when it comes to ongoing stuff with tentpole titles like this, or the X-Men, or even like the Avengers, historically he hasn't done a great job, or at least not for a very long time. So it never really surprised me too much that all this stuff with Superman was a disappointment. That was always a huge mistake in my eyes. There were characters that were floundering a bit more that Bendis could have probably done good work with. Even Naomi I really like, because that's kind of him working more in his wheelhouse, kind of outside of the mainstream DC spotlight and adding his own little character that kind of feels like she has way more value than anything I've seen across his entire collective Superman work. And that's the other problem too, is he's been given so much of Superman that it's swung the balance tremendously towards his favor. Because not only did he have Superman Action Comics and like basically he took Super Sons away so that they could do Legion, and I checked out of that series a long time ago. I checked out of this series a long time ago, and this book hasn't changed that opinion at all. And that's pretty negative for a book that I came into saying, well, I did find some value out of it, but beyond that, Bendis is really disappointing. And earlier I was saying how there's rumors DC is going to kind of step away from these big name writers and focus more on lesser known names. Bendis is supposed to step away from Superman once he's basically done writing whatever he's already written, but it's always been unclear how long that's going to be because he could have written a lot by now. Like, this could go on for a while and it's just junk. I wouldn't recommend any of it at all. There's so much better Superman stuff out there. Even ongoing right now, there's a digital first series called I think like Superman Man of Tomorrow or something like that I've really been enjoying. A lot of those books are by Venditti, and he's got a great handle on Superman, and he's able to write with that sort of heart, even without having to go back to Superman's family. It's good stuff. So there is good Superman books out there right now even. Like, that's where this becomes even more useless. If you go on Comixology, you can pick up a ton of great Superman books for like 84 cents or 99 cents a piece, depending on if you're a member or not. So yeah, just seeing chat, but Tevia's just kind of repeating some stuff again. Yeah. Oh, he does have a good point. So how is anybody going to retcon his entire Superman run? I don't think they will. I think we're just going to have to come to terms with like Jonathan Kent being a teenager again, but a good writer will recognize the need to bring this family back together again, maybe have them all living in one roof at this point. Like, it's fine, if anything, necessary for Lois Lane to be doing her own things and being her own person, but she just feels so apart from Superman and it lacks value. And same thing with John Kent. Like, they're better together. That was the whole point of the Dan Jurgens era, and they missed it. Like, oh, and Tomasi's Superman run, as another person was saying in chat before. Thunder God said was saying, ha, who knows, in response to Tevia's fun line about the retcon. Sid was turned off the moment Bendis introduced the real reason Krypton was destroyed. They'll probably pretend it never happened. I forgot about that myself. That's the sort of thing that felt superfluous. We already had quite a bit of mythology around Krypton, so adding stuff did not feel necessary. It's better that Krypton's just sort of a random little planet. Like, why do these intergalactic characters, like these Synmar characters, care at all about some random world? Why are these aliens so powerful? It diminishes the value of aliens overall. But unfortunately, DC doesn't have a great explanation for where, like, Earth gets overpowered compared to the rest of the universe, the way Marvel does. Marvel has a good explanation for that now, and we can thank Jason Aaron for that. And think about how much stronger Marvel is without Bendis now. We didn't talk about that much, but that ended up being a huge unintentional benefit of all of this. That Marvel really is not much stronger without that man in the company anymore. And it really speaks to the value of pushing out new talent, not relying on the same old names over and over again or across so many series. Marvel has that weakness too, as like to be fair, but it's just Bendis is one of the prime examples of relying on a writer too much for far too long across the big two companies. And DC came in way too late with that. Like Bendis should have made that move a long time ago, and it probably would have meant something. But as of now, it's just been a huge waste of time. Except Naomi. I did like Naomi, and I've only read that like one first book. I don't know if there's anything else out there, but I thought that was fun, and I think she's a fun character, unlike everything else. But I've said that already in this stream, so I guess I'm repeating myself. And yeah, next up, we had a couple more X-Men books to talk about, and I gotta like physically go to the comic book store and pick up some more books that have come out. So stay tuned for all of that. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island.